This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. You dialed set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're here, and we broadcast 2 hours. 2 hours daily from the Missouri Ozark Mountains. John is engineering the broadcast. And if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. And if you'd like to listen to USA Prepares 24/7, 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Rick Miller's with us. Welcome, Dr. Richard Allen Miller.
Good morning, Vincent. I love Vietnam and Finelli. That was something I even listened to back then. He was that famous.
Yep.
He was a broadcaster in Vietnam when Radio Free Europe was down in the dumps and the whole thing was starting to fall apart at the seams.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now I'm looking back and realizing that all of us were duped. This war wasn't even about those poor villagers and their 18th century way of living.
Yeah. And we bombed them to smithereens. We
for what purpose?
We napalmed them. We lit them on fire.
That in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What we did was absolutely horrible. We had daisy cutter bombs that we would drop them and they would go off and they would just cut everything down like a big lawnmower. It didn't matter what it was. It would just obliterate everything in its radius.
That's when Monsanto was still a weapons company before they got into GMOs and the colossal giant that they have now become. Oh, no, wait a minute. They just sold to Bayer on some Nazis. Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rick, I've asked a lot of people who were in that conflict, the Vietnam War, or the Vietnam conflict.
Yeah,
what was it all about? What was it all about? And, why did we do it? And no one really has a good, clear answer that makes any sense. Other than
money. War is good for business. When I visited you, you showed me a little button with Ford Motor Company with a Nazi signal right on it.
Yeah. It was a lapel pin. It is a lapel pin, and guys would wear these in their suit coats, and it would show the Ford blue oval, the Ford logo that's still in use today, adjoined side by side with the red background Nazi swastika. Yes. And so Ford was saying that they were aligned with Nazis. No question about it. And
it was good for business.
Yeah, it wasn't.
They sold us both weapons, and they sold us both automobiles, and they didn't care who you were. They just made money, which was what. And Harvey, that's where war became what it really is.
Harvey Firestone was a good friend of Henry Ford, and for many, many years, all new Fords that came off the assembly line were fitted with Firestone tires. So if Ford was in it, Firestone was in it. By association.
Let's talk about Mobil Oil and how they got in it and the oil thing. Listen, the whole thing's nuts. I was in graduate school at the time. My graduating class, 62, we were not at war with Vietnam, and yet my entire graduating class went to Vietnam except people like myself that went to graduate school and then were allowed to make weapons as graduate students. I did. I made the first infrared visual goggles. There were 17 of them that were made, and I was one of the 17 graduate students that put that together for Vietnam. And, I didn't understand then what the, peace sign and the love is free love meant. I was right there, part of it, all in the 60s. But guess what? Half of my graduating class never came home. And Don White, I was best man at his wedding, 1 week later, they didn't even have enough of his body left to even identify him. I lived it. Mm-hmm. 62 is when I graduated, and that's when all my buddies went, football players, wrestlers, kids I went to high school with, they're gone.
Yep, and the Vietnam War was 1954 through 1975.
I remember when Lyndon Baines Johnson did not want to end that war. I remember. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why would he want to do that? It was good for our economy.
Yeah, and that's why we've said for a very long time here, never reelect anyone, because that's the kind of stuff they do. And I got to tell you, I've talked with parents, I've talked with high school boys about enlisting in service and the reasons not to do it, and they don't want to hear it. They love that uniform. They love the
and they want to support our vets, and that part has meaning, but it is ill-placed because of the wrong intentional reasons.
Hmm? Yeah. I was at a farm supply buying some protein lick tubs. I bought 12 of them. They were 200 pounds apiece. We had our trailer, and our son and I were there, and these two guys were helping us load the trailer with these 200-pounders. And I asked one of the guys, if he was going to school, and he said he was taking a semester off. And then later I asked him, so what does he want to do? And he said he wanted to be a cop. And I'm like, oh, no. So he wants to be a cop. And ultimately, a little bit later, I asked him, why? Why do you want to be a cop? And he says he likes guns. He likes guns, so he wants to be a cop. And then specifically, he told me he wants to be a SWAT cop. And I said, killing people. And he smiled. That's sick. It is so upsetting to me that this young guy, handsome young guy, is so misguided. Somebody taught him that it's really cool to be at the trigger end of a SWAT incident, which is really an execution. That's what it is. It's murder. It's premeditated murder. And this guy wants to do it. He wants to sign up for it. He can't wait to get behind that .308 rifle. Can't wait.
Well, that's Alice's restaurant. I want to kill, Serge. I want to kill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We've fallen pretty far, Rick. And I remember talking to some parents of a high schooler many years ago and explaining, when your son enlists, he's not the only one that has a gun. And he's not the only one that's going to be shooting. There's going to be plenty of shooting. And people are going to be shooting at him. And he may not come back. Is it worth it? And why are we doing it? And why are old men sending young men to die? Why? For patriotism? Come on. I'm not buying it. For freedom? I'm not buying it. We go into Vietnam and we obliterate the country. And we say, well, now you've got some freedom. Isn't that great? We've destroyed their way of life, their infrastructure. We've poisoned their land, their air, their water. And we believe that they ought to thank us for that. That's just one small country that we've picked on. It's like the big, mean giant.
I'll see how I just tangented us from what we decided we were going to do. That's what I love about you, Vinny. You're so cool. And really, you have a wealth of information and stories. That's what makes working with you so much fun.
Let me tell you a story about yesterday.
Here you go.
So, here we go. So yesterday, I spent some time with Dr. Shealy in his office, and I'll tell you a little bit about that later, scalar technology. But after that, I had in my vehicle a couple cases of Matt Stein's book, When Technology Fails. And he called the house and wanted, the last time you and Matt and I were together, he said, hey, can you take these cases? And because it was difficult for him to fly back with a couple cases of books. So I said, sure. So I put him in my truck, took him back to the farm, and he asked me if I could, contacted us, asked me if I could get him over to Pensacola, where he's going to be speaking. So we said, sure. So I had him in my car, and the UPS service center only opens at 3 to 6 p.m. in Springfield. So after Dr. Shealy's broadcast yesterday, I had a little bit of time. So I went over to Sam's Club, and I was in line to get a bite to eat. Normally I don't do these kind of things, but I did. And I was in line, and I turned to the woman behind who just got in line behind me, and I said, are you looking for the longest line? Because if you are, this is it. And so we're, fortunate enough to be in the longest line. And she said, sometimes it goes a lot longer than that. And then the guy behind her said, yeah, I listen to you on the radio. And so he recognized me from my voice. And
You're
he said,
doomed, man.
Oh, and well, here's what happened.
We're going to get that.
So I said, well, there's a table over there. Would you like to, have a bite to eat together? So we chatted, and then he told me about the story about AT&T. He's one of the guys that listens on the telephone. So he calls that listen line number, which is 605-477-3249. And AT&T beat him up. AT&T threatened him because he calls that number, listens on his unlimited long distance to USA Prepares every day. So AT&T threatened him. So he had to switch to a different cell phone provider because AT&T gave him a hard time about listening to USA Prepares. So that's the story. And guess whose name came up during our little snack together? Rick Miller. And all the cool stuff that Rick talks about. So it's a small world. And that's a little story about what happened yesterday. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. I'm Vin Finelli. This is USA Prepares. We'll be right back. So, Rick, one of the people I met yesterday, the same man that I had lunch with, or a bite to eat with at Sam's, is a registered nurse, and he's a hospice nurse. And I've invited him to come on the air with us, and he's going to think about what that means because he wants to talk to his company to get permission to do this. So, that's a pretty tough job, being a hospice nurse, because what happens is that when you go see your patient for the first time, day number 1, that's the very, very best condition that you're going to see that patient in for most cases. And then it gets worse from there. And then ultimately, typically the patient dies. So I've invited him to come on the air, and he may do that. So I'm looking forward to learning more about hospice, how it works, and so forth. So, Rick, what are you up to lately? Are you going to be traveling? Are you going to be dispensing your information?
Until April and May are big days for me. I'm going in April. I'm down in Puebla, Mexico. I have been invited back down to an international conference on consciousness. This one is going to be dealing with aliens, and they have speakers from all over the world coming in. And I'm fortunate to be part of this. This is based on my mentor, Dr. Stanley Krippner. And the last time I went down, I got to visit and get to meet some very cool people, including Eben Alexander, and who wrote Proof of Heaven, and others like that. And it's just incredible. Let's see, what else am I doing? In May, and I'm worried about Puebla, because that's where I'm going to be, because of Popo. It's active, and there's going to be about 8 million people that get killed when that one actually finally blows. It's throwing smoke right now. It was doing that when I was down in 2014. In May, we're going to Colorado, and it's Gaia TV, and Nexus Magazine is doing the first Nexus conference in more than 15 years, and it'll be a large event. I will be one of the keynote speakers. By the way, that's in May 1st, and Beltane. And in April, my mentor, Dr. Stanley Krippner, is going to be there, and he doesn't know this yet, but I have dedicated the non-local mind in a holographic universe to that man. He's the one that introduced me to Edgar Mitchell in 1970 that allowed me to be part of mission control with Ed Mitchell's moonwalk, going around the moon. We did the ESP studies in 1971. That led to the ESP book I wrote for Nick Begich. And I want to give it to him in living memory. He's the one that recognized my holographic concept of reality and got me to go to Prague. He's the one that had SEAL Corporation contact me to work with Navy SEALs, and then later MRU with Navy Intelligence and Dr. Carl Schleicher. And so that's my mentor, Dr. Stanley Krippner. He was Maimonides' Dream Labs up in New York with Montague Ullman, and wrote Dream Telepathy that led to Dreamscape and other movies that were like that. That's based on his work. And then he's the one in Prague that published the Psychoenergetic Systems with Gordon and Breach, and included my works in there and my presentation in the International Conference on Psychotronics. That's way back in the early 70s, and he's still alive. He's formed Saybrook Institute out of San Francisco, Humanistic Psychology. He's a psychologist, and so he's been my friend. He comes up to visit me every year when he comes to Ashland to do Shakespeare, and so he got a chance to meet Julie. I'm very excited about Grace Thorne. Hi, Grace. Yes, I'm giving her a ring. But it's going to be nice when Grace finally moves back where she belongs out here. It's just not the same without her presence on a daily basis here in Oregon. A lot of people miss her.
For those of you who have not heard the name Grace Thorne, Grace Thorne is a USA Preparedness instructor, and she at one time was a 6th grade teacher in Ryan, Oklahoma. And every 6 weeks or so, she would occupy the conference room at her school with her entire class, her 6th grade class. And they would prepare questions that they wanted answers to that they couldn't get out of their books and from other sources. And they would come on the air with us one at a time for 2 hours and ask their questions of Dr. Richard Allen Miller. So, Rick, I was visiting with Dr. Shealy at the International Holistic Medicine Clinic in Springfield, Missouri. And he has this room, which he calls the Scalar Room. He and Dr. Sergey Sorin operate this practice in Springfield, Missouri. And they have this room that's like a conference room, and it has these 4 scalar energy, I'll call them transmitters. And they are powered up, and they've got blinking lights. And when you go into this room, there's a sense of calm within a minute or two. It's almost instantaneous. And he has these recliner chairs, these comfortable, thick padded recliner chairs, and you can put your feet up, and some of our instructors were there, and they just kind of showed up, and they pulled up a seat and started relaxing. And the sensation that I felt was the same sensation that I asked everyone, what they were feeling. I asked them on the air yesterday. We were broadcasting live from there, and I asked them, what they felt, and we all felt this sensation of tingling, like pins and needles if your leg or arm is going to sleep. And but it was a sense of calm as well as that. And those who might be a little bit nervous were relieved of a lot of that, apprehension of being on the air. So can you tell us, that's what I experienced when I was in this scalar energy room. Can you tell us what your thoughts are of scalar energy? What is it? How does it work?
Yeah, I can. Scalar is a term that was first coined by Bearden out of Texas. He was an engineer that worked under some of the projects I did for Schleicher. And basically, it's like a scalar is a lesser component. That means that if you are walking on the earth with the sun hitting you, your shadow would be a scalar. It's you. It reflects what you're doing, but to a lesser octave. That means it doesn't have a third dimension of component to it. It's lesser. That's what scalar means. Now, the way Hutchinson and others in the so-called Hutchinson effect worked was that they will use radar to try to set up a resonant cavity oscillation that scales up to a higher dimension of experience. It's like a metaphor. And so like in your body, the way a microtubule will talk to a cell salt, and the way the cell salt will talk to the cell, and the way the cell talks to the liver, and the way the liver talks to the body, that is a scalar progression of resonance. And the way, if you do this, it has an effect in a higher plane here. And so it is a concept that is used to understand that this radar is, or the smoke you got going down the road, is having an effect on higher functions of the body. Now, what Norm and others have done is use, for example, sacred geometry that will somehow focus electromagnetic fields, gamma rays, whatever, to a higher vibratory level, so that, okay, the way the Buddhists did it is that they would have a bowl of water and they would chant across the water, and if they could get the water to start to vibrate to their voice, it would, if they had the right pitch, cause a standing wave to form, which later was called the Sri Yantra, or sacred geometry. That's where sacred geometry came from. Cymatics started with water and sound, and the relationship of and if you did that correctly, a vibratory wave would go across the water for the rim and the size of the bowl. That's called, that Bessel functions, that would set up a sacred geometry. That's where it all came from in the terms of cymatics. And basically, it is a resonant cavity oscillation. And if you do it just right, phenomena happens on all levels of the hologram, all the way up into 5, 6, and 8 dimensions. It goes right on up the scale. That's why they call it scalar. Now, it is a metaphor of what Norm, others have done, and when they do it in the right positions in their house, the right positions on Earth, now the Earth becomes a resonant cavity oscillator with the Bermuda Triangle, the Oregon Vortex, the da-da-da-da-da, that we have found phenomena across the Earth, what were called ley lines. And that's why you put all the churches in that direction, and you put all the castles in that direction. And there were places where the castle would go, and where this came out of Druidic magic and those systems from previous epochs. And we studied these in the military, and later had scalar weapons, one of which is, what we call silent squid, or what later became synthetic telepathy, where you use a microwave band And then you can heterodyne on that microwave band voices so that you can hear them in the head, because a microwave would cause the temporal lobe to resonate or ring, like it'll heat up slightly and become liquid crystal. And then they would be able to hear the voices in the head using 0.3 to 3 gigahertz. It's technology. Now, what Norm has done is set up his chamber or magic circle, or the place where he does business, where he has a closed system where you can get away from the noxious, toxic vibratories of the earth itself and get into a place where you're more centered for yourself, and then you can do the work you're supposed to be doing, whatever that is. I don't know if you got all of that, but it's a simple concept of scaling from one dimension of information to higher dimensions using resonance.
So Rick, the feeling that I had, the feeling that the others in the room had during that broadcast, 2 hours, are those what you would have expected us to feel, this tingling sensation?
Everybody's going to see the color differently, hear the word differently. Is red the same for you as it is me? Yes and no. Yes, mostly yes. It doesn't matter, because red is an arbitrary bandwidth going from yellow to blue. It varies. There's, and so why is it that we call this one red? Actually, they're all different colors, and everybody feels slightly different, because it turns out we're all different tuning forks. However, there are bandwidths where everybody agrees, yes, that's blue and that's purple. So you know the distinction between when it becomes orange and when it becomes red. Pretty much we all agree on that part of it. And so there's bandwidths going from red to yellow. And we say this is red and we say this is yellow because we make a distinction in a more binary digital form, if you will. That it's incremental and rather than analog. And that's how we call metaphor. A
man came in, senior citizen, he had lymphoma, and he was in a lot of pain. And his pain subsided in parts of his body during his stay in that room, while I was there. And we got to be friends, and I've invited him to be on the air with us.
You know why it stopped there in that room? Because, and I'll tell you why, because he had anger, and when he went in that room, the anger subsided. And anger is the first step toward cancer. I don't know anybody that has cancer that did not first start with anger. And that's what...
It's very interesting that you say that. Very interesting that you say that, because he shared a story with me about how he was on a motorcycle. And a woman who was drunk crashed into him. Really banged him up. I mean, really, really messed him up. And as a result, he has metal in him. And I asked him about that. I said, I think if my son were involved in an accident or somebody rammed into him and he were able to get up and that were the situation, he would walk up to that person and say, "Are you okay?" And if the person said yes, my son would knock him out right after that. For being insensitive, for being stupid, for being careless, and for banging my son up. I mean, I can just see our son doing that. Actually, I can see both of our boys doing that. Not that I said, if somebody runs into him, the first thing you do is see if they're all right and then knock them out. I've never said that to him, but I can understand how they would just react to stupidity like that. And the man said that, he was angry for quite a long time. Very interesting that you mentioned that. So,
and that's how it works. That is
I'm quite
a metaphor
certain
again.
that
There's another scalar concept where anger vibratories up into the physical plane. That's why all illnesses
I can tell you,
are... Trying to give you a metaphor, on how to look at what a scalar really means.
Yeah, it's brilliant, Rick, what you're doing. I can tell you that, this guy and I, he happened to be a Hollywood stuntman for a couple of years, and we were talking about that, and we were laughing and having a great time. And I was so glad that I had the opportunity to meet him. And of course, I invited him to come on the air with us and tell us about some of his experiences in Hollywood and how it works and so forth. But he shared something very interesting with me, and that was, he said, you see those motorcycle crashes in Hollywood in the films, and he said, they look like these big Harleys. He said, really what they are little Honda dirt bikes, and with big gas tanks to make them look like these big Harley motorcycles. He said they're not, and it's a little easier to take one on a spill and survive it if it's a little Honda with a big gas tank rather than a big Harley. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Class, if you'd like to read some of his books, buy some of his books, you go to docram.com, DocRam.com, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. And Rick, so my understanding is that a scalar is a lesser component, as a shadow is a lesser component of me. A shadow of a building is a, yes, or a shadow is a lesser component of a building.
That's the key word. In this case, your shadow is with the sun. In Norm's case, it's with electromagnetic radiation and da-da-da. Okay, it's a lesser component reference to something else.
Okay, so would the shadow be a lesser component of me, or would it be of the sun?
It's a lesser component of you in reference to the sun. And that's why in previous epochs, they would call the shadow a demon. It was a lesser component of an angel. It was a fallen angel, a lesser component. An angel is more than human. Then you have human in 3 dimensions, and then in 2 dimensions you would have shadow. And that's why in Jungian psychotherapy they call the shadow your demons. The lesser parts are a projection of the shadow. When you can see something evil in someone else, that's the only reason you can do that is in reference to it having existed within yourself.
All right. So
I just took you to another level of concepts. And I want you to understand that scalars are always in reference to some system. And in this case, it would be your shadow would be in reference to the sun.
Okay. And the man who came into the scalar room while I was there, who had lymphoma, his pain subsided. Now, is this possibly mind over matter, or is this the possibility that his...
Yeah, it's in reference to that. He had less pain.
Now, does that mean...
In the reference system of Earth and this room being sanctuary.
Okay. Is it possible that he had less pain because his body is rebuilding itself and fixing itself with the addition of being in this scalar energy?
If you did not have pain, you would not be alive. You are basically consuming yourself by the electromagnetic transmitters, literally consuming your physical body. What you're trying to do is put it below a certain level of threshold for consciousness, because it is consciousness that creates the pain, the cancer, and the feelings of goodwill. And you have a choice. That's what made you God's favorite. And we forget that, and we get consumed, like I have been recently, with depression, and I have to take personal responsibility. And having sanctuary, whether you do it in hypnosis, a scalar room like Norm has, that is what is written about in my ESP book called The Mind Room, where you go briefly for sanctuary. You draw a circle around yourself, and you become within yourself, rather than being external to all the influences of soot, Fukushima, and war. It's a metaphor.
That brings to mind going to church, Rick.
Well, then that's what the church is about, and why churches at one time in history were put here, not there.
So is there scalar energy within a church that is just there? And is that why some people feel better about going to church?
The power of the group will actually consecrate a situation, just like we could if we all went kumbaya and decided we had enough of this BS going on. World thought would change.
Well, that's what the Catholic Church tried to do with every Mass.
There you go.
Stand up, sit down, genuflect, all in unison, ready, set, go. I'm not being sacrilegious. I'm saying that's the way it is.
And you'll notice
Catholic
all your
Church.
elders are on the outside of the parishioners inside, and they put the elders against the wall to focus the energy.
There you go. Rick, we'll be right back after these short commercial announcements and top of the hour news. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with DocRam.com. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go, hour number 2 of USA Prepares with Doc Ram, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. During those commercial breaks, it actually works for me. I got a chance to call a guy who's going to be an instructor at USA Prepares, and he owns the largest tractor salvage yard for Deutz Fahr dealers, DEUTZ, tractors in the United States. And so I placed an order with him. I've got, so during that last commercial break, I got 8 valve cover gaskets ordered, a front lug nut, a used power steering cylinder, and a used seat, because I bought a tractor without the original seat. And it's got this Volvo S80 luxury seat in it, this leather seat in this tractor, and the seat is so big I can't see behind me. So I ordered a used seat that actually came with it. Why did I order a used seat? Class, a seat for this Deutz tractor, this 1985 tractor, is $1,400 for a new seat. Rick, is that crazy or what?
No,
$1,400.
You just did a change in lifestyles right then without even knowing it, and it was sacred. And the reason you did it was because of something I said. Mm-hmm. That's the way resonance works.
Yeah. So I talked to the owner of it's called WardBrothersTractor.com. And he's going to be an instructor. I really like this man. He's helpful, and he's going to send me a diagram of how a power steering cylinder is put together on this particular model tractor. He's a really good guy. So, for those of us who have these German tractors, he's going to be a real asset in helping us. And I told him I was on a budget, and so I was able to get the valve cover gaskets. I needed a front lug nut. A front lug nut for these tractors can cost as much as $10. I'm talking about for a lug nut. Why? Because it's kind of a special size. It's a pretty large lug nut, but $10 for a lug nut is pretty high, and I was able to get a used one for $2. So I'm delighted with my purchase to fix that tractor. And why am I fixing the tractor? Because it's freezing cold here. It was 18 degrees this morning, and it's a cab tractor, and if I get it working right, we'll actually have some heat when we go to feed the cows in the winter. We'll have a cab around us and heat if we have enough time for it to warm up. So, Rick, we were talking about scalar energy, and I really appreciate your description of scalar energy in the
well,
in the first
it's a metaphor. It was a concept.
Mm-hmm.
That's what made Parsons work so important. Conceptually, it moved us from looking at things from one way to looking at things a different way. Which one's right? It doesn't matter. That's what's called magic. It is physics with a mystery school.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know exactly what resonance actually means, and here I am, a world authority in resonant cavity oscillators. Did you know that the microtubule in your body, that's a little protein that has structured water in it, that Jerry Pollack wrote about, it, causes muscle to behave and act the way it is why they say there's memory in your body. Like if you have a certain kind of body style, it will automatically tend to want to go back to that place, just like you do with anger? Well, as a metaphor, well, that lives on in memory and structure after you die. There is something more going on regarding the concepts of space-time that also have to do with resonance.
You were talking about memory, and what came to mind is, if you get a dent in your car, if you bang it out quickly, the metal has a memory of the way it used to be. So if you do it quickly, you can get it back, pretty much the way it was before. And I'm wondering if that is why, let's say we have a job and we're going to work. We go the same way, same path every day we go to work, and we don't want to deviate from that memory. Is that what that's all about?
Yes, it has a tendency to want to hold true rather than in the universe, which is always about change. That is why we are in a cavitation ball with a black hole leading to a white hole. Or, more precisely, we're probably mislabeled that wrongly, and we're actually in a white hole going to dark matter. Who knows? Where we are today, we don't understand anything. It's all about concepts, and what is real is imagination. And anger is a tool to be used to wash a floor. And when you have anger, if you direct it rather than allowing it to direct yourself, now instead of cancer, you have the whitest wash ever with Tide soap.
I'm trying to get this in my mind.
I'm trying to speak above you just slightly so that it inspires your imagination in the relationship of what I said, so that you have your own concept within yourself, which is unique and belongs to Mick. Oh, sorry.
I was thinking about several things all at the same time, Rick. And one of them is...
That's what imagination does. It gives you a panorama of choices. That's
and one
why
of the things,
you were God's favorite. You have that right.
And one of the things I was thinking about is the people who I know that are happy are healthy. The people I know who are unhappy are unhealthy. And so the question is this a chicken and egg thing? Are you happy and then therefore become healthy, or do you have to be happy to be healthy, or do you have to be healthy to be happy?
Which one came first? They're both the same thing, just like fear and faith. Neither are real, and both are necessary for the center.
Mm-hmm. And you said many times on this broadcast that nothing is real, and for those listening to that, they're probably thinking, well, this keyboard in front of me is real. But I think what you were meaning by that is, when you look at the news, you look at the media, you look at what politicians are saying, what they're saying is not what they mean. They have ulterior motives, and we've been lied to and conned and hoodwinked. And I think that the clearest example of that is the media is now being exposed to the greatest amount ever that they were deceptive in the election or selection of the President of the United States. We were duped, hoodwinked, and conned.
What do you think about the big movement about fake media and how the media is going after fake media? How does that work?
And the fake media is the real media, and the
maybe
dinosaur media is
the out of. The truth is not, like a lot of Christians believe that the truth is in the Bible. And it's true and it's not true. What's true is that the words in the Bible will resonate something inside you, and that is where the real truth lies for you. And that's why it is not about the written word, it is about your response response to the written word, because that inside is where I start with my truth, not outside and other people agreeing with me.
I met a guy yesterday as a truck driver, a retired truck driver, and he's from Europe, England. And I said to him, and he's living in the United States, and I said, so how do you like it here? And he said to me, you know why they call it the Show Me State, Missouri? And I said, yeah, actually I do. And he said it's because there's so many liars here that you have to.
Yeah, gotta love it. You gotta love it.
And we were right down in the epicenter of the Bible universities, right? Just on the edge of Springfield, Missouri. And they have these, Bible colleges and universities there. And he said, and we're right in the middle of these Christians, and these guys lie more than anybody else.
Well, that's the deal. It's what you try to walk your talk, and that becomes your enemy. I.e., it's like charismatics. It's not that he has the truth and nobody else does. Truth is true inside each of us, even if you're a Buddhist or a Muslim. It's walking your talk that is the challenge and what is called spirituality. Not what you do, but how you do it. You have that choice also. And that is where getting closer to God occurs. Spirituality. Not what you do, but how you do it. It is the difference between intent and purpose. And each of us have a different purpose to make the whole right. And if it seems as if you are in conflict with another, that part is God's will for the balance of everything. God's not at war in my universe. God's not at war with the devil. The devil only occurred approximately 2,000 years ago when the Church of Rome put God at war with something, and God's not at war with anything in my universe. He is. It is man who has created the devil and the polarization of God into something lesser that is somehow in conflict with something. I had to love Flip Wilson. God, the devil made me do it. Geraldine. Yeah, that was a great concept.
The devil made me do it.
Well, because if you see evil in someone, that's the only way you can do that, is if you had it within yourself so that you can see it in another.
And that's the interesting thing about politicians. I find it so difficult to figure out what they're up to because it's so foreign to me that anyone would do.
Exactly. Now you're getting back into the resonance. That's right. Yeah. Stay true to yourself. That is, if you do that, and that's where you find mastery. And a master
will be. Doc Ram's with us, and if you'd like to go to his website, docram.com. DOC as in doctor, RAM as in Richard Allen Miller.com. DOCRAM.com. Rick, I was driving or traveling through Springfield, Missouri yesterday, and I was stopped at a traffic light, and there was cars going through the intersection at the other direction. So I was waiting at the red light, and cars were trying to go across the intersection, and there was a woman who was walking with her very young elementary or I would think kindergarten, first or second grade. The child was bundled up. It was cold out. And so the mom was walking across the intersection. Cars were trying to get through the intersection. The mom was looking down at her cell phone, texting, totally oblivious to all the cars that were trying to get across the intersection. And her daughter was in tow behind mom. I would say 5-6 feet behind mom, following mom's good example. Mom is totally oblivious to everything around her, including the cars trying to get through the intersection, and the daughter is in the way of these cars. Perfectly dangerous situation. And so here's the question. You know, I don't like cell phones, and I think this activity is ridiculous. What is it so important that it can't wait till mom gets across the intersection, especially with daughter in tow, right? So is it the cell phone frequency? Is that what is destroying mom's ability to be a mom, to pay attention to the most precious gift ever that person has ever received, her child? What do you think it is? Is it the electromagnetic radiation? What do you think?
What we've been talking about, the concept of scalar. Now, what your mom is doing now is no longer having direct eyeball-to-eyeball communication. I remember a time when you went to visit somebody, it was special because it was an ordeal going from here to there, and you always brought something as a gift. Always. That concept has gone to a lesser scalar of now she's staring down in a void and using slang and quick selfie pictures, happy face, Mr. Yuck, whatever, to communicate conceptually less information, less personal involvement to the exclusion of her immediate now. And that is what cell phones and texting is doing to our society. It is giving us less direct communication, which was in Hindi called darshan. A master would not accept a student unless he looked them straight in the eye and the soul was touched. It's called darshan. And when you eliminate that with just a voice, telephone or Skype, telephone and a picture, there's less than physical presence, and texting is down to essentially anything you want, including not really being present with that person, either a toss-off of one, statement to another, like good luck and da-da-da. It's very minimal. And that's what our society is matriculating down to with that technology. And it has scalars across the board with biological and emotional and moving right up into the intellectual and then archetypal levels of information. And I have to tell you, that's why I have a throwaway track phone. And while I have become dependent on a computer, I remember when I used carbon paper.
Sure. And so, Rick, when we lived in Virginia back in the 1990s, there was a weekly newspaper that was the county newspaper. And it had a column in it where one of the locals would write about the adventures of some of the other locals. Like Louise spent Friday traveling all the way to Richmond, Virginia. It's a 50-mile trip, okay? It was like it was big news. It was that ordeal you're talking about. And I thought, why is this? Well, it's because that part of rural Virginia didn't have electricity until the 1950s. So it was a big ordeal.
And the Navajo don't even want electricity.
Doc Ram's with us, docram.com. So, Rick, stress. Want to talk about stress?
I'm sorry?
Would you like to talk about stress?
It's made me sick, and I need a better management program. I used to use sex, now I have to rethink everything. It's just unbelievable what's going on with me right now and Amazon. And I am learning as I go and wished I was way more ahead of the curve than I am. It's unbelievable. I have people out there that are selling my book new cheaper than my book. How does that work? Well, Lexington, Kentucky is where they're printing Simon & Schuster's version of my book, and Simon & Schuster didn't know it. And Amazon they're doing full money on policing it, I think, but I noticed they have loopholes where they have plausible deniability. And there's 20 people selling my book new. How does that work? 20.
Rick, are you saying that if you look at it,
being printed by somebody else and they're taking all the profit? Yes.
And does it say published by, and the publisher is
even in some cases they have forged my signature. And so then, of course, the better way around that is snail mail, which is what I'm recommending, and my website. Well, guess what? My website was simultaneously hacked at the very moment Amazon store when these books started being sold. And that means I didn't get any order from anybody for almost 1 month. That's impossible. I've got, 45 years of selling books. I've always sold books every day. I've got enough titles. The Encyclopedia of Alternative Agriculture just came out, and I have only had 4 sales on that.
Wow.
Yeah, it gets better. Now, you don't think that's... I have $2,500 between me and savings right this moment with Social Security as my only source of income. That just covers my rent. I have no margin, and to lose a full month of incomes has devastated me to the point where I am having to go back to work at Weimar at age 73. It's crazy. And guess what? When I started saying this last week on the radio, I got a flood of email of similar small publishers. Same problem. And when Amazon and Lightning Source and Ingram's and Google, I forget the search engine AIs, when they started to form a conglomerate like Monsanto for food, it became really apparent that we have a serious problem going on that's way far worse than war and politicians. And I am only at the tip of that iceberg. And yeah, I was depressed. I'm broke. I can't even have a Christmas this year. And so I need people to buy my books from my website. And guess what? That got crashed, so they had to go to Amazon. Guess what happened then?
It's really upsetting, Rick. A lot of hard work goes.
It happened to me this last month. I had from November, I had no sales. A few books here and there, but really on Amazon, these are very serious problems, and we'll investigate. It's taken them 2 weeks, and I haven't heard a word from them yet. Continues to go on and on and on. If you don't ask the right questions, it has plausible deniability, and they are free to take over. That's what they do. And
so we're talking about people who aren't too bright. They're not bright enough to write books, so they steal them.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. No, it's I'm a sucker, and suckers get what suckers deserve.
Yeah, see, I don't look at it that way.
That's what capitalism is about, and why both capitalism and communism, kind of like fear and faith, don't actually get you there. Faith isn't going to work any better than fear is. Yesterday, I talked with a mass murderer. He called me from prison. The man is a paranoid schizophrenic, and yet he was a very solid person. What happened? 18 years ago, he had paranoid schizophrenia. He thought his family was sneaky, working for the NSA on him, and he killed them all. And for 18 years, he's been in lockup, and he only listens to certain people on the radio, and I happen to be one. It's interesting that he called me at the very moment my girlfriend and I were watching Criminal Minds. But I really like the man, and I've never a serial killer. It turns out I've had a lot of strange people around me, just like we all do, and we don't know it. That's the way it works. When I was teaching at the University of Washington, Ted Bundy and the Green River murderer both were sitting side by side with the first two victims in the class I was teaching. Had no clue. And when I watch Criminal Minds, which is based on real events, I start to realize that there's more aberrants out there, and that there are predators that take advantage of all of us, even on a local level.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about these predators. Let's talk about government pedophiles.
Yeah, I knew you wanted to do this one today. Yeah, you saw some posts I put up there on the pedophile thing. Yeah, in England. They're busting, and now they're starting to realize there is a system of magic like voodoo that has centuries of tradition using small children for their energy. I helped break a pedophile group in Olympia, Washington, back in the 70s. Like I did Scientology's group in Boston called The Process, when there were cults going on with L. Ron Hubbard and trying to process somebody using mind control. This is a system of magic that uses youth and the energy of innocence, like voodoo uses blood spurting all over the place, scaring everybody with a chicken running with its head cut off. That energy sparks the imagination and weirdness in each of us. There's your shadow. It comes out with demons, and you get hooked with a system that works. And now everybody's waking up to the fact that the Republican Party, for example, has a weird cult in Texas. And there's all of these Skull and Bones and Bohemian Grove that we call Illuminati. Illuminati is a misused, incorrect term for Jesuits that went after the Church of Rome when the Church of Rome turned against their scientists, using them as a scapegoat during the Inquisition. And I'm going to say something. They went out and they went after, as assassins. There's going to be a movie out on that very thing where they're like super soldiers. And I have to tell you, what's going on in our society right now is that there are, number one, too many people in the world. But the reason they want less people is it's easier to control that machine.
Well, also, if you look at Paris and if you look at some of the other countries that have high population densities, the air pollution is unbelievable. I mean, you can't see.
China is down bad, with worse than anybody could possibly imagine.
Mm-hmm. Rick, when you were you ever in a fraternity?
Yes and no. Not in college. When I came out of graduate school, I got rushed like high school kids get rushed going into college for the first time. Mm-hmm. I was married. I was a dormie that later became an independent. I lived next door to Sigma Nu, and my best and longest friend is a criminal lawyer, now retired, that was at Sigma Nu, and we've been friends since forever.
The reason I ask is I was a fraternity member back in the 70s.
Which house?
Of an Tau Kappa Epsilon.
Gotcha.
TKE.
Each one's different.
And at the time, it was considered the world's largest international fraternity. I don't think it is anymore, but it was. And I was the president of the fraternity, and I was, before I was initiated, I was asked if I'd like to be initiated at the International Conclave, which is held every 4 years. And I reluctantly agreed. And I remember going on stage in front of, I think, 4,000 people, and there were only a couple of us. I mean, just a couple, literally, not like 20, just a couple of us who were initiated by the Grand Preakness, and that's what the Grand President's title is, Grand Preakness of the fraternity. And he was wearing this these robes, and he looked like the Pope. And I remember just before just as we were going on stage, my sponsor said to the guy next to him, "Okay, do you have the blood? Do you have his blood type? And did you get the blood?" And that was really unnerving. And there was no blood in this ceremony, but they acted like, I was going to be sliced, diced, cut, get a transfusion, something, drink blood. I didn't know what, but it was really unnerving. But there was no blood in the ceremony at all. However, it was a ritual that, it's a secret ritual, but I can tell you that I wasn't privy to any secrets, and I didn't do anything that, like George Bush, Skull and Bones, whatever is alleged that happens there. None of that happened with me. There was just a ceremony, and that was it. That was it. And so I haven't done much with the fraternity since. So the reason I asked you was if there were blood rituals in any of these pedophilia things that are going on. Do they do things with blood, human blood?
Some do, some don't. It's an emotional thing. What they're trying to do is, again, a scalar concept of moving up into higher dimensions of intent and purpose. And
okay. We'll be right back. I'm going into a break. We'll be right back. Doc Ram's with us. Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Rick, we were talking about pedophilia, and what's the relationship to government and pedophilia?
Well, there are nothing, but there are within all governments and all large corporations, secret, like the military. The military isn't good or bad. It's got agendas and purpose, and it's different than shopping. So with that said, within each organization, large bureaucracies, there will be small cults that develop their own interdimensional purposes, which are self-serving and different than the large one. The U.S. Forest Service and BLM, for example, come to mind. And there will be people within those large things that form a secret society within a large organization that have no accountability. And
okay.
complete,
how about, all right.
Complete,
how about,
what do they call it? No accountability. Like within NSA, they're outside the law. Mm-hmm. And with
Microsoft,
that said, then there's a use for misuse, and within those, some of these start using old systems of magic to run and rule the roost. And it is ever present and always part of what you get when you have organized religion, organized government, organized. Whenever you have that, within that, there will be people that will try to misuse the system's full intent or purpose. And that's what's happened to our governments. That's what's happened to our local governments. That's what's happened across the board. And you always need accountability and what we call oversight.
Rick, Microsoft has been in the news talking about virtual reality and how you could experience hallucinations with virtual reality that mimic LSD.
Well, LSD is a neurotransmitter in the brain, and it's actually lysergic acid amide. And just like the chill is dimethyltryptamine in your brain. And that's why these are called drugs on the external world, because they're actually toxins that mimic chemistries in the body, like opium. And opium in the body are ecothalines and endorphins for pain. And they're different than opium. And what happens is when you start supplying the brain with external stimulants or depressants, whatever, then you have the body stops producing its own because it doesn't need it. It's getting it from here. It's the same thing with government, rituals, and everything. It's scalar, again, just like we've been talking about. This is a real problem. and balance is what's needed. Not faith or fear, but the integration of both. That's what magic is about. Path working. Learning how to find your own balance.
So if someone uses these glasses, these virtual reality glasses, can they literally damage their brains?
No. What damages the brain is your imagination's relationship to it. They're just external. What's going on is that you have a choice and you're being fooled on what is and is not real or important. That's why you have to go internal and know yourself. That's the first place you start. Self-realization.
Rick, there were some clams that were dug up, and they're 500 years old. And they have, the clam shells have these rings on them. And they've discovered, through looking at these rings of these 500-year-old clams, that since the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution has caused the atmosphere to change and the ocean to change. Are you concerned about that?
Of course I am. It is changing.
Serious concerns?
Yeah.
I'm very concerned about it. Okay. All right. What a great note to end on. Rick, thank you so much for being a Dr. Richard Allen Miller class, docram.com, docram.com, if you'd like to go to his website and keep up with his activities and his take on the news. Above all, honesty and integrity.